Welcome, everyone. I'm Dave Hunt. I am the founder and wealth manager of Milestone Wealth here in Greenville, North Carolina. So at Milestone Wealth, we help families optimize their financial lives. And we do that by offering products and services at a very high level. Now, we tell our clients that, yes, money is important, but money is only important by the things it provides us, whether it be security, travel, family, more time with family. So we focus on money because we know that it's important in our daily lives. But we also know there's other facets of our lives that are just as important, if not more important than money. And we were referring to mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. So at Milestone Wealth, we really take an interest in our clients. We want to make sure that they have a well-rounded life, that it's not just about the money, that they are really living their best life. And so we ask ourselves, how can we help them do that? Well, one way is by bringing experts that can share information that's just normally not available to the public. And we are doing that tonight. We have a very special guest, Dr. Sam Sears. He's a good friend. He's a neighbor. He's someone I have served on a school board with, and I know him well and have known him for many years. So Sam is a professor of psychology and cardiovascular sciences at ECU Health here in Greenville, North Carolina. Sam is really known around the world for what he does. He's been published over 200 times. He's spoken in many different countries. He just shared with me that last year he spoke at Harvard and Stanford and Johns Hopkins. And so what does Sam do? Well, Sam works with cardiac patients. And you can imagine when you have a cardiac event, not only is it a physical event, it's also an emotional event. And so Sam has really devoted his career to studying how do patients recover mentally and emotionally during these cardiac events. And the information he's learned over the years, he's going to share with us, one, to hope it doesn't happen to us, but two, to help us prevent something like this from happening. And if it does happen, how can we recover maybe more quickly? Sam has put a lot of work into this presentation. We know you're going to enjoy it. Now, there's a chat box. You can hit the chat button and you can type in a question anytime during the presentation. We'll pause a couple times and we'll share those questions with Sam and get his feedback. And there'll be a short survey at the end. We want to hear from you, what you think of this presentation. But we know you're going to love it. And without further ado, let's introduce Dr. Sam Sears. Welcome, Sam.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dave. What a great opportunity to be here tonight and to share with you some of our work and I think some messages that our patients help us understand. Give me just a second as I share our screen and bring up the slides. Everybody see that okay? Great.
Looks good.
Excellent. So our goal tonight, heart and soul. What can heart patients teach us about living, loving, and the qualities of life? As a psychologist embedded in cardiology for over 28 years, I've had the privileged window to see both inside the heart and inside the minds of people dealing with one of the most difficult things life can throw at us in a health situation. In particular, a heart attack or the experience of serious cardiac events is often people's worst day ever. In a way, I have a job in which I meet people on the worst day of their life. And that contact, that opportunity to assist in some way to help our patients understand the drama, the difficulties that come with heart disease is what we do as psychologists. And cardiology and families have engaged us for all these years to do that very thing. And the lessons learned, I think, are powerful. They go beyond simply heart patients. This is a tattoo of a patient's spouse I took. And I think you can see that it says, From struggle comes strength. And that indeed, the very experience of heart disease may be one of those events that makes people stronger, that helps us understand what matters most in life. And we'll look at some of those ideas and lessons as we go forward tonight. So my goals for us tonight is I want to share with you some themes. What are some bottom lines that we found over the years? Talk about the state of health in the United States. What are our risks and what are the ways in which our fellow citizens are dealing with health, mental, physical, and financial? And then I'll share with you finally some heart and soul lessons, some messages and tactics that our patients have taught us over these years. But you have a homework assignment too as well, and that is during those lessons to try to find one strategy during this talk, one thing that sticks with you that you take forward tomorrow, one takeaway that you use as a way to change the way you think about yourself or your life so that heart patients do, in fact, teach us something along the way. So we'll start with our themes. First and foremost, the reason that we have a job is that heart events shake people up. All of our patients at some level deal with significant distress, that this threat of one's longevity, one's burden that goes with this disease, the interruption and disruption of the plans they had for their life, and the potential harm's way that family members then find themselves in, perhaps financially, or even more directly, just not having the people they love in their life. That across the country, there are virtually no centers that involve heart patients in this kind of psychological care, except for here at East Carolina. It's been the very thing that we're most proud of, is that our ability to design services that help reduce that shakeup, that difficulty that we talk about. Well, just how difficult is it? In a recent study that put together a meta-analysis where they put together all the studies that look at the psychological distress of our heart patients, you can see that almost a third of our patients deal with depression immediately following heart events. Another third deal with anxiety, and way over half deal with stress that is substantial, unmanaged stress. And that these psychological factors are associated with bad outcomes, that our patients who are managing these psychological reactions, it's harder for them to recover. In a way, they have one more burden from the burden of heart disease. So when you think about this idea of psychology in patients, our patients don't exactly recommend this process. This is a challenging disease state. Terrible, wouldn't recommend it, 1 star, right? Having a heart problem. But some of our patients would also put on a shirt like this and say, yeah, but I'm going to be a heart warrior. That these challenges that I'm going to face are going to make me better. They're going to temper me. They're going to make me tougher and more resilient as I go forward. And the way that they do that is a second major theme, which is heart patients acquire a special knowledge about life. When everything you've got is at risk, you value what you have so much more. That there's something special about the threat that heart disease presents that crystallizes people's priorities, allows them to see what really matters most. This insight into what matters in life, this special transcendent view of your life, takes some courage. It takes courage to look at your own life and to consider what might be or what could be, what options you have, and what changes you can make. But it's a lonely road at times to make these changes. And what's interesting most is that our patients form a level of gratitude that's quite unusual. For example, when you compare our heart attack patients to breast cancer patients, you can see that the number one, the gray lines, the gray bars are heart attack patients. You can see that heart attack patients are way more likely to make a positive, healthy lifestyle change. So they know, okay, I got the message. I need to be healthier. But look at the second most significant change that our heart patients face. They report a greater appreciation for life. And it's this special knowledge, as I've deemed it, this appreciation, this prioritization, this valuing what matters, that I think makes these patients able to teach us so much. greater appreciation for life, even more than breast cancer patients. And you can see that breast cancer patients have their own benefits. They have improved relationships and improved empathy. Some of our heart patients get those, but their heart patients are most marked for a greater appreciation of heart and life. I mean, who else can wear a shirt like this, right? Death, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. That's pretty good stuff, right? If you can just bust that, you can imagine yourself going down to the golf club with the death been there. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to beat me at golf? I've died once. You ain't got me anymore. In fact, I have a patient who every time he gets admitted to the hospital, they have a homecoming parade when he comes home. And they also have essentially a birthday party for him when he comes home, as getting a rebirth, that encountering another heart problem and being able to overcome it. The family actually has a party for him when he comes home. So it provides both a celebration of life, but also a motivation to get back home, to get out of the hospital and overcome the threats. Because heart disease is, in fact, an episodic disease state. It does have episodes. It's a recurrent type disease state. And recognizing these challenges, and in this case, getting a little swagger about it. Hey, man, busting this shirt on somebody. And then I think the final theme is that coping matters, like how people deal with stress and how they deal with health challenges really does contribute to the outcome. The most common way that people deal with heart disease at first is actually avoidance and denial. And then that does, in fact, provide short-term relief. In fact, psychologists have studied maybe what they should do is have a little bit of denial at first, but that turns out not to work very well at all beyond the first couple of days, because heart disease does require change. But it's a lesson about how our problems, whatever they might be, that avoidance is often a quick reaction, but it's not likely to help us in the long run. Instead, strategic confrontation seems to be the most adaptable way to deal with things. And the good news is everybody knows how to cope. Nobody has gotten on this call tonight and said, well, I've never known how to cope. Tonight's the first night. I hope I learned something. You do know how to cope. And much of what we do as psychologists is magnifying and coaching, bringing about the kinds of skills and strategies that you already use, but actually try to be more mindful, deliberate, and strategic about how you adjust. Because the truth is that stress doesn't equal distress. As much as a third of our patients are depressed and anxious, but that also means 2/3 aren't. So what are those 2/3 doing that we need to understand? What is their secret? What is the secret coping? How did 2/3 do okay? And what could we learn from them? Well, the data suggests that there isn't a secret, but rather an ability to be agile in your efforts to cope. Said differently, it reminds me of the serenity prayer. This idea that God grant me the serenity to change, to accept the things that I cannot change. So use strategies to accept what's happened, but also the courage to change the things that I can. And importantly, the wisdom to know the difference, that some things can be changed, some things must be accepted. And let's not mix up those two piles of things. I mean, I could tell you 100 stories about the chief executive officer that has a heart attack, comes in and starts firing all the doctors, instead of actually saying, wait a second, I don't need to fire these doctors. I need to confront the fact that I have a heart problem. And no amount of executive behavior will change that. Or the person that says, well, I've had a heart attack. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle. I'm going to be a Peloton warrior, and that'll fix my heart problem. Instead of actually taking time to say, wait a second, there are things I need to do to change and tactics to do that. And then there are things I need to do to accept what's happened. And one of the principles of all, when I'm called to the bedside or I'm called to the clinic, it's almost always the case that the individual suffering is having some difficulty separating these two piles of activities. In short, we call these problem-focused coping. So things you need to do to get after it and change, or things that we need to do to accept and deal with the emotions of what's happened. As a society, we're pretty good at problem-focused coping. Well, we'll have more technology. We'll get a better doctor. We'll go to a better hospital. We'll do these things that are problem-focused. But in fact, what actually usually drives the problems is the emotion side. Because technology and excellence in care is fairly uniform. At a major teaching hospital with 1,100 beds like East Carolina, we've got state of the art. solving the problems are relatively simple compared to adjusting to the problems. And in fact, all of us have a fingerprint of coping. We all have our own ways of coping, and we want to respect those. Each of you have some ways that you blow off stress or engage or talk to key people in your life. Those are coping strategies. You may see it as getting advice, but it's a coping strategy. And when you look at big studies that have taken all of the maladies that happen to human beings and say, how did you cope with being burned? How did you cope with chronic pain? And people will report hundreds of coping strategies. And we put them in the computer and we say, with artificial type intelligence and say, find me what's similar about these things. Make sense of all these hundreds of ways people cope. They boil them down into two buckets. One that has to do with trying to solve the problem, and one that has to do with trying to deal with the emotion side. That this idea of coping is multiplicative, but it really comes down to these two buckets of coping strategies. And it's important to keep in mind, how do we be agile? How do we bump back and forth when we need to get after the problem? And then sometimes we need to deal with what's happened. And in my view, our society and all of us often spend way more time on problem focus and less on the emotion. It's just not sexy to cope with emotions, right? That's not as cool as I got Dr. X, I got device Y, I got the latest. Instead of saying, I came to grips with what's happened. I got this. Here's the steps I'm going to take. You just don't see that quite as often. So when you think about the work we do, part of it shake people up. Yeah. And the good news is they get through it by identifying their priorities and recognizing what matters most. When everything's been threatened, you value what you have even more. And our patients also teach us that being able to bounce back and forth, to deal with what's happened and deal with emotions, those tactics of being savvy, finesse between those two things, helps our patients do well. I don't know, Dave, you got a question for me?
Sam, I failed to mention at the beginning of the presentation that you are passionate. You are passionate about your work. You're passionate about ECU. And I tell you what, it's hard to show passion through a Zoom camera, but you do it, and you do it excellent.
Well, I can't hide behind my bangs, so I gotta be, this is all you got, man.
You're fully exposed. You are who you are.
Fully exposed. There's no place to hide here. So I barely have eyebrows.
I think you've teed this up wonderfully. We have a much better grasp and concept as far as, setting the stage as far as who you work with and that initial reaction that people have and how they handle that. So right now we don't have a question, but I'd say
Great.
Proceed. We're eager to learn more.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. So in this next part, I just want to talk about the state of health in the United States. I mean, do we have a problem? I mean, are we a healthy nation? Do we have a problem? Maybe this isn't needed. Maybe everybody's healthy and we don't need to worry about any of these things. Although I don't think you think that's what the data is going to show, do you? Let's look at physical health first. What does the data show about how United States health looks? What kinds of indicators do we have? Well, the very first indicator we have is that the gross domestic product spending for American health is the greatest in the world. The most recent data from 2021 into 2022 is that our GDP spending is 19.8. So we are basically, health is a massive part of our economy. It's a massive expenditure for this country. So we are spending a lot of money on health. But the leading causes of death remain. The most predictable cause of death for everybody on this call is heart disease. Heart disease by far is the #1 killer of American men and women. Cancer, when you add up all the cancers of every type, you can get close to the mortality figures of heart disease. And then third, the newcomer, not available, never reported in before, COVID, with the third leading cause of death of Americans in 2022. So collectively, we have some threats to our health. But interestingly, the most significant threat to our functioning and our quality of life is actually chronic disease. So this data, as you can see in the 2020 data, about 48% of Americans are dealing with a chronic disease. So in the last slide, I talked about what might kill you. But in this slide, pretty much half of us are going to have a chronic disease that interferes with our day-to-day qualities of life. And it is here that prior to COVID, all of our money, in my view, needed to be moving toward chronic disease. COVID brought us back and maybe took big steps back in terms of dealing with infectious disease again, because many of the infectious diseases that we were managing before had rescinded. But now chronic disease is not only is chronic disease occurring in about 48% of people, we see the trend going up. And now, of course, we have long COVID. So yet this very acute threat that we all needed to deal with now becomes a chronic disease. So COVID continues. And it's kind of a life cycle for a disease. These diseases, whatever they are, become highly lethal, fatal, and then we manage them, and then they become a chronic disease. And so it's challenging. So our health, the physical health in America has continued challenges, but I would note that chronic disease is probably our biggest threat to our day-to-day life. But I got another one coming at you. I think you'll be surprised by some of this data. What is the mental health of this country? The American Psychological Association last year did a survey of the stress of Americans, and I'm frightened to tell you that 27% of Americans, the first era there, 27% of adults said that most days they are so stressed they can't function. That's 1 out of 4 people. They're driving around in cars. They are working. They're in places that you're interacting where 1 out of 4 Americans are saying they're so stressed they can't function. And here's the even worse figure in some ways. It's really hit our young people, that our young people are much more likely to be in this group. You know, we talked about the impacts of COVID and social development and interpersonal skills. And, you know, people under 35 were particularly hit by COVID and have shown persistent psychological distress. In fact, universities and high schools have had to buffer up on psychological and mental health care because 1 out of 4 Americans, and in this case, even higher in our young people, are experiencing psychological distress that's quite dysfunctional. So it's not just, oh, I wish I was happy. This is people with anxiety and sadness and intrusive thoughts and trauma and uncertainty, ambiguity, and concerns about the future. So much so that if you look at the data, this is the most recent data from SAMHSA, which is the Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration of the U.S. government, you can see that overall, about 22% of Americans were diagnosed with a mental health condition in 2021. So again, we're moving toward 1 in 5, moving toward 1 in 4 Americans with a mental health concern. What about financial health? And this is certainly Dave Hunt's expertise. This most recent survey came out about a month ago, showed that 61% of Americans are more scared of running out of money than dying. The idea of how is financial planning being executed? How are the resources that each of us have, and how do we extend those? That collectively, these things suggest to me that whether we're talking about the threats to our health in terms of physical health, chronic disease, mental health, or financial health, that we are at a stage where we're at an inflection point, a point where being more deliberate, being more aware and systematic about how we're managing our thoughts, our feelings, our health, our money, seems like it's time. And in fact, you know, I salute Dave. I mean, who invites a psychologist to give a doggone talk to his business owner? What if I went off script? What if I went rogue on him? But indeed, he knew that brain health, heart health, and our day-to-day activities, that is our health. That is what makes up our future. Our future and our psychological wellness does depend on what we think about the future. Our future health, that is our day-to-day health, predicts what we'll be able to do in the future. Our functionality, our health, our physical health, our mental health, these are things that are all absolutely part of it. How silly would it be to have lots of money and be ill? And so it draws out the idea that how our health persists and projects into the future has so much to say about our future quality of life and what we believe about that. So I'll pause here for just a minute to see, there was any other comments or questions about.
Sam, just an observation from my point of view, the chair that I sit in with my clients. We sit down a couple times a year, and I think it was probably because of COVID. But you just look at the economic, the social, the political changes going on. It's almost like things are accelerating. And I think people feel like things are out of control. And, when they come sit down with me, a lot of times clients just want to vent, they want to share. And I'm always happy to listen. But I think a large part of our job is controlling people's behavior. If we can keep people from being rash or doing something that's going to be hurt them financially, if we can prevent those things, then that's certainly going to help them get to their goals quicker. But it's really, I find myself a lot of times telling clients, turn off the TV, quit reading the internet, just focus on your family, have something to look forward to, a trip or something, just get away, but don't focus on the negativity. And I've never been a big fan of the media because their job is to scare us, because that's how we watch.
Yeah.
So turn it off. You control it. They don't control you. So I don't know if these factors play a part in, what you're seeing with your patients, but I know I've been doing this 35 years. I've never seen people, our clients, so agitated and really kind of almost worked up than I've seen it over the last 2 to 3 years. Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, I do think that the uncertainties, ambiguities, and changes in our world have, shaken up people in some ways. I think what's analogous between what you experience and what I experience in terms of helping other people is to increase the deliberateness and thoughtfulness about actions, whether that be financial moves or physical moves or emotional moves, that when we decide to make a change in our lives, to make sure that it's well deliberated and not rash, as you said. And I think when mental health problems emerge, often it's hard to get back to basics and deliberateness. It seems like, oh, I got to go see something. I got to go get that medicine or get that doctor or see that therapist or whatever. And those are helpful. But there is some degree of deliberateness and planfulness and mindfulness that I think can help our patients and help all of us to be deliberate about pursuing our goals. And I think that's what I'll talk about next, is kind of the heart and soul lessons. Like, what do we know now because of our patients? So I don't know, I'll let you react and then I'll start up again.
No, I mean, that's excellent. And, I just try and get people to focus on life is can be short,
Yeah.
but it's meant to be lived. It's not meant to be feared. And so
Okay.
we really encourage people, just go do something fun, make memories, enjoy life. And if you're just so angry or just worked up, it's no fun. And you're probably going to run into you more quickly, won't they?
They might. Well, let's look at heart and soul lessons. And I think some of those very lessons are ahead of us here. I'm going to suggest 4 things that I think our heart patients have taught us that I want to share with you tonight. I want to first start with self-reflection, talk about reconnection, taking actions, and then giving thanks. And while these might sound simple, the depth and complexity of these ideas in the context of managing a heart problem is actually remarkable. And I want to share that with you. First and foremost is self-reflection. I think I'm not a big car guy, but I know this means something to me, right? It means that the car is so smart, it's constantly checking itself to see if there's something wrong. And I think about that a little bit about self-acceptance, because this was a report I got just this week. Nissan sent me this vehicle health report. I said, what is that? Well, they have a system where they're actually going through and checking my brakes remotely by the computer in my car. Brakes. I mean, I have a Nissan Rogue. It isn't like it's a Maserati. Dang, it's a just a regular old SUV. And look at the way in which there's a system check going through this car. But we don't have a similar system check for ourselves. And I think part of what I think this does, as this special knowledge I talked about, and this this being shooken up, that heart patients, I think, have this opportunity to say, how am I doing? Is this what I want? I mean, could you imagine if we had one of these gauges? I mean, geez, we could figure out who you'd want to avoid when you got home. You could say, oh man, today's not the day, right? I got to stay away. And what if we did have such a gauge that was insightful about our capacities? That could we really or check our mind the same way we check our engine? Is there a systems check physically and mentally that we could go through? And the answer to that is there is kind of, right? I mean, we know there's certain areas of stress in our lives, and we can put them on kind of this idea of a thermostat set of stressors, right? So you can see some of the areas of function, right? Practical problems like getting where you need to be or paying for things, family problems, which, can bring anyone to their knees. Certainly having the wear and tear of emotional or physical problems or spiritual concerns, that to think about it as not so much, yes, I'm stressed or no, I'm not, but rather that we're on kind of a thermometer all the time, that there are times in which, yeah, we don't have a lot of distress, it's a good time, but there are times in which our reactivity, our impulsivity, and our lack of deliberateness could actually create a problem for us. We could behave in ways that aren't consistent with our goals. And I think that's really the way I think of it, is that the self-reflection means, what are my goals, and then where am I in that process of getting there? And there is a physical aspect to this. I think stress is often sort of paid attention to as this, oh, I'm emotional. But there is a sympathetic reaction inside our bodies, right? Our bodies have a system of fight or flight, a system that activates us to either fight or flight or freeze. And that process, when it is left on, that process of getting ready to fight, if every day you're in the readiness of a fight posture, in fact, that is hard on our bodies. And if I were to answer the question, does stress kill? I would say no, unless you leave it on for many, many years. But the thing is, many people do that very thing. So that the heart and the body are incredibly tough. Our bodies do amazing things for us every day. Amazing. But in fact, when we leave ourselves in situations that have overdrive, hyperarousal, hypervigilance, where we're paying attention to all the threats in our world, much like you said, watching the news or worrying about family members, or all of the things that can create that sort of constant vigilance, those are the symptoms that can wear us out and wear down our bodies. Now, there's nobody who knows more about coping with high levels of stress than some of our military, our special forces. I happen to have a nephew who is a special ops stationed here in North Carolina, and he goes under incredible training. And he's given me some tips, and I've paid attention to many of the things he's talked about. So what is a special forces mindset? How do we take a look at ourselves, check our engines, and how are some ways that we look at that? One key element for special forces is the idea of fixed versus growth mindset. The very idea that a special forces person is a quite unique specimen is absolutely the case. And it would be understandable if special forces people said, I am a bad dude. I can take on incredible situations. I'm trained to deal with being a prisoner of war. I'm trained to be starved. I'm trained to be in the most adverse situations ever. But if you ever talk to the people who do that work, they are among the most humble you'll find, because they have a growth mindset. Their mindset says that I'm always learning. I'm always learning, and I'm never at the top. I embrace challenges. I see challenges as an opportunity to overcome adversity. In contrast, the sort of Tom Cruise character from Top Gun would be a fixed mindset, where that person's constantly flexing and telling you about how skilled they are, and they don't want to get ruffled. They want to avoid challenges. They want to blame other people and basically say, I'm the man. Fixed mindset is a defensive posture in which life's got to be just right, or I don't like it, instead of saying life will be what it is and I'll adjust and adapt to it and overcome it. Special forces recognize adversity and welcome it. They welcome change and they welcome adversity. It's what they do. But we can do that too. We can also find ways in which mindsets help us. Navy SEALs report this idea of being patient, that somehow finding patience around the changes of life. in fact, using tactical pauses to actually pause and think about what is it that I want to do again? Am I on track? And to make a decision and go head on force or full on force. Multitasking is not particularly effective, but marshaling all of our intellectual and our emotional resources to go forward on a plan is. Being fully present, being aware of what's actually happening, and being deliberate. Our special forces mindsets that go together to create someone who has self-acceptance and self-compassion. We talked about this earlier, about the tactics of being able to have the patience to accept change. One of the things we often have to deal with with heart patients is, did I cause this problem? Am I the reason? Am I the problem? Hey, it's me, I'm the problem, like Taylor Swift says. But the question is really being self-compassionate. Special forces, heart patients, ourselves have to find ways in which we turn compassion inward as well. I have sat down with so many heart patients who say to me, I ruined my life. I ruined my body because of dumb decisions. And it's almost always the case that that's an over assignment of blame. And in fact, I often say to them, if this happened to your friend, would you say that to them? Would you say, you ruined your body and you have no future? Of course not. We would be incredibly compassionate to other people. I'm always amazed at how compassionate people are. My heart patients say, I can't go to the mall. I can't go to the Pirates game. I have to use a walker. It's so embarrassing. And I often say things like, have you ever looked at someone in a walker and went, what a loser? Nobody does that. And they're not going to do that to you either. But we're incredibly hard on ourselves. And I think one of the things that we have to learn along the way, in addition to the toughness of dealing with adversity, is also the acceptance that we're doing the best we can. And that coping actually is everyone doing the best as they can, but we can always use a little coaching. That's all. And so I think self-compassion, checking your engine, recognizing full force forward, recognizing being in a growth mindset are part of the beginnings of a psychological mindset that can make us tough and ready to deal with all that happens. What about connection? Do we follow life by ourselves? I love this picture because I took it of these ladies, right? Heart failure coach and heart failure survivor, right? You're not in this alone. It reminds me of the game show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where you have people on there and you find out whether or not you have smart friends. You also find out, apparently, they answer the phone. Have you called anybody lately? They always say, I called my mom not too long ago. She says, why are you calling? Just text. So the idea here is that our communication patterns are very different these days. But who are your lifelines? Who do you call when you need an answer to a question? But even more important, who do you call for emotional support? Interestingly, research suggests that we need 3 people. To be on the show, you had to have 5, by the way. You had to have 5 people across content areas to be on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Research with heart patients suggests that we need 3 people who we can call and be able to discuss emotional issues. If we don't have 3, the outcomes are worse. So I think about that sometimes because, I moved up to North Carolina a few years ago. I couldn't get 3 guys to help get my couch out the front door. 3 guys I'm going to call and say, hey, I'm in trouble, man. I don't know how to cope with what's going on. That's a tall standard. 3 people that you could call and say, hey, it's 2:00 in the morning and I'm in trouble. Research is very clear. Part of the recovery of heart disease involves other people. So who's on your team? Who would you call if you were on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Who would you call? And how do you appreciate that team? Because it's not just who will serve, but it's also how do you appreciate that team? And everybody on the team matters. I love this because of the old Beatles. You guys may have probably some Beatles fans on the call today. If we had to guess, who do you think's the weakest member of the Beatles? Who do you think's got the least talent? I got to tell you, Ringo's going to win that. Don't you think? I mean, come on. He's no Paul McCartney, right? Ringo, they added him late. He bangs on the drums. I mean, how talented could that dude be? There he is, right? Here he is. Got to be Ringo, right? I mean, yeah, we could take or leave you, Ringo. That's not what Paul McCartney said. Paul McCartney sent him this postcard, 1969, out of St. John's Wood, from Paul McCartney, Ringo, Brooke Fields. You are the greatest drummer in the world. And look at the bottom. Really? No, really, you're the greatest drummer in the world. I love this postcard because it highlights the very idea that while people may have doubted Ringo's ability, his team did not. Paul never doubted it. And here he is. I don't think Ringo needed to be patted on the back in 1969. Frankly, I think they had a few good things going on at that time. They were doing more than holding my hand. They were making big cash and flying around the world. But McCartney stopped to thank him. McCartney stopped to tell him that he was the greatest drummer in the world. And I think it highlights how teams work. Everybody matters. Everybody in the family, everybody on the team, everybody at the business, everybody in your life that matters and helps you. They maybe deserve a postcard. I don't know. I can't think of one better than you're the greatest drummer in the world, but go for that. So connection, reflection. What about taking actions? No talk would be complete without taking actions. I want you to think about things. I want you to self-reflect. I want you to think about your teams. But at the end of the day, you got to do. And the very nature of the Serenity Prayer was have the courage to do things that need to get done. Getting things done does matter. Doing does beat thinking. And, heart disease is a condition in which the easiest way to manage heart disease is to sit back. Try to back out, man. Hey, man, I got a heart problem. I better not do anything. Hey, man, I'm not going to cardiac rehab. They make me walk there. I got a heart problem. But the heart's a muscle. It's not a bone. It doesn't need to be splinted. It needs to be worked. And so do our minds. Doing beats thinking. Getting out and doing things makes sense. Psychologists have been interested in this forever. We've always been interested in how do we change attitudes and behavior. But the research is clear. Make a change, and you'll make changes in your thinking later. So you may not feel depressed. You may not feel like you can beat depression, but you beat depression by going ahead and going at it. So what do you love to do? In fact, researchers now have been focused on, and we do this, we've been focused on perhaps one of the ways depression and anxiety takes hold in people's lives is by this disengagement process. Like, well, I have heart disease, I have depression, I have anxiety. I need to pull back. I need a special situation for me. I got problems. But in fact, one of the ways many therapists have shown to be highly effective is by simply helping depressed and anxious people reinsert themselves in life. That means planfulness, mindfulness about I'm going to go and do. Yeah, I do get anxious. The patient might say, yeah, I get anxious going to the grocery store. Good. Well, that's on the list now. You got to do that now. That the very thing we fear, confrontation, strategic confrontation, makes sense. So planning, what do you love to do? These activities of fun and intimacy and awe and peace have been consistently shown to help people get better and to live full lives. Like activities of fun. Here's Taylor. We mentioned Taylor Swift earlier. That looks pretty fun, right? Look at all those people having fun. And there's no place I have more fun than right here. There's no place I have more fun because 50,000 people came out to say that East Carolina University matters, that we matter to this community. Yeah, it might be about football, but it's really about, this is a community. This is a group of people that care about something altogether. Intimacy. Dave talked about time with family, and sometimes families are complicated. It's not always the easiest. Conflicts occur, but intimacy means stopping, practical pausing, learning about the hopes and dreams of somebody else, the empathy of walking in somebody else's shoes, to be able to see that I didn't know I was coming across that way. I didn't know that was important to you. I didn't know that's where we wanted to end up. I didn't know that that was our shared goal. It reminds me of the old Pina Colada song. The person didn't know their partner. And so they wind up putting in a classified ad and they wind up at the same place finding the same people because they didn't know the very thing that both of them were missing. So intimacy goes beyond some sort of romantic or sexual. It has to do with intimacy of thoughts, intimacy of feelings, intimacy of goals. There are many ways in which intimacy goes way beyond simply the basic ways and much more profound in how we meet each other in our thoughts, our dreams, and feelings. This is me looking at a redwood tree last year when I was out at Stanford. That's me down there in the bottom. And look at that tree, right? Research has suggested that feelings of awe are something that's incredibly powerful. In fact, recent research suggests that some of our immune systems are affected by being in awe, meaning that when we encounter events that resize our world, that make us realize, maybe I'm not as important as I thought. Maybe my concerns aren't so astronomical. Maybe I'm small. Maybe I'm humbled by nature, by faith, by holiness, by love, by emotion. That maybe those experiences of awe are the power. And it does appear that awe sticks out among positive emotions as one that's particularly important to pursue. I think that's why people travel. I think that's why people go see grandkids. I think that's why, in the end, awe comes in a lot of different shapes and forms. But it's all about resizing your place in the world. And this redwood certainly resized me. And certainly activities of peace. I think activities that when you do them, you are in the right spot. Activities in which they are the moments that quietness, stillness occur. I think we're wired for that. That seems to be part of what happens to our heart patients seeking peace. So I often call these, quality of life. I'm a quality of life researcher. Well, you got to know what it is you love to do. What activities do you enjoy? What activities make you feel alive and well? Remember, staying in the house generally is not one of them. Feeling alive and well means there's nowhere else you'd want to be than right there. The Michigan game, East Carolina and Michigan, 109,000 people rooting against our Pirates of little old Greenville, North Carolina. There's no place else I'd rather be than right there. I don't care what the score was. And when we find those moments in life where we're where we need to be, notice them. Be there. Be fully there. Not multitasking, fully there. And, recognizing why do we like those things? Why is that so great? Because I love underdogs. I love when people underestimate us. They underestimate our university. They underestimate us. When people underestimate you, say thanks. Because it's a way of overcoming the very things that you'll face. Being healthy, there's 100 ways to be healthy, right? It's just like coping. There's many, many ways to be healthy. This is just a silly bingo card. I don't really mean this, except to say, look at all the different ways you could be healthy and find ways to treat yourself like an elite athlete. Treat yourself in such a way that your body and your mind matter. Digest the kinds of things that help you be stronger, that increase resilience, and recognizing that that's part of this overall process. So reflection, connection, actions, finally given thanks, right? Why is this so important? What are you grateful for today? What a Pollyannish thing to put in a talk. Why would I do that? Because research is very clear about gratitude. In large systematic reviews, gratitude is strongly associated with better health. Gratitude is associated with better sleep, blood pressure control, glycemic control, asthma control, eating, all of these things. Now, that doesn't mean that it fixes those diseases, but it means that you're working together with medicines and medical care by identifying and recognizing what you're grateful for. This can sound Pollyannish, but it's actually an important idea. And the reason is because of something we call attentional bias. Attentional bias is the idea that when you're looking for something, you find it. What you pay attention to is what you will see. Now, what that means is if I say to you tomorrow, I want you to find 5 things that you're grateful for when you see them, it magnifies the presence of those things. I mean, it's a little bit like an Easter egg hunt of things you're grateful for. To spend the day saying, hey, I got to find 5 things I'm grateful for, but I got to see them. I got to lay eyes on them, or I got to hear them. They have to be sensed. And it's very clear that attentional bias does that. I had a patient recently who I said, well, I think it's really important. This guy was incredibly depressed, and I was very concerned about him. And one of the things that I had him do was I wanted him to define what he wanted most out of life in terms of family, in terms of financials, in terms of activities. And I had him go away and come back by filling in these things that he was the things that he was hopeful for, that he really wanted. And he came back and he came into my office and he threw down the paper and he said, "You got me." I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what I got. What do you got here?" And he said, "You got me. You had me go and identify what I wanted, and I already had it." I really didn't know how to finish that because that wasn't exactly what I was going for, but he got the message. He got the message that he hadn't valued what he had. And sometimes gratitude means that we start looking for what we got, not what we need, not what we're not looking for something, some of the things we have. It reminds me of this old idea from Mr. Rogers that his mother said when scary things happened, look for the helpers. You'll find people who are helping. But in the context of all the challenges and adversity that we face, there are people who will want to help you. There are people who stand in the gap with you. They stand in the trench with you. They have the courage to roll up next to you, whether they be healthcare providers or teachers or financial advisors or friends. They have the guts to stand in there with you. They have the courage that we talked about. And being grateful for those people and savoring those people is part of this process of gratitude. It means that we have to value what we have. And, as life gets older, as we get older, there is opportunity for reminiscing and savoring. Just like there's opportunity to move forward, there's also opportunity to savor what we have had, because life does change. Our access to resources changes over time, whether it be our health or anything else, familial resources. But notice the last part of savoring the future and recognizing the gratitude for what we're trying to do is also part of this process. So I think our heart patients do teach us a lot of things. I think they help us the importance of checking our engines and self-reflecting. I think they do remind us that we're not in the game by ourselves, that we have lifelines. I think it helps us to know that taking actions, recognizing the actions of awe and of gratitude, and giving thanks for what we have, these things are part of this transformative process that heart attacks often produce. It reminds me of this very shirt. They whispered to her, "You can't withstand the storm." She whispered back, "I am the freaking storm." Oh, I am the freaking storm. Because right here is where we are. This talk is about trying to boil down a lot of important ideas. But this talk's really about trying to find one way that you go forward into the future. One way that the experiences of our patients, the experiences and privilege of being a psychologist to walk side by side with them, teach us things. They teach us about priorities. They teach us about what we love. They teach us about our quality of life. What can you take from this? What's your take one? That's my challenge to you. Because from these struggles comes strength. And it's the very nature of life, finding ways through adversity. And I think our heart patients, and I think you, can do that as well. It's the heart and soul of life. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sam. Kind of my takeaway here is that people come to you probably, like you said, on the most difficult day of their life. And they're like, what positives can come out of this? Nothing. I'm lucky to be here.
Sometimes. Yes. Yeah.
But you know what? They meet you. And you come to them based on your experience, your history, your research, everything. And I imagine some of these people turn their lives around in a way that they never would have unless they had suffered that cardiac event. So, not that, hey, nobody wants to go through
Yeah.
a situation like that, but can it be a blessing? Absolutely. Everything we experience can be a blessing. And I think it's having that proper outlook in life. Whether you're talking about the financial markets that we go through, our health, family, if you look at it, hey, there's something positive to come out of this. And I just love how you take that worst day ever and you turn it into something positive. So you really are doing tremendous work, and we appreciate the presentation. We do have one question from Tommy. He says,
Sure.
is there an easy, tactful way of talking to a friend or relative about their obesity and your concern about their health, particularly their heart health? How do you talk to someone you're concerned about?
Well, this is a tough one because I think particularly obesity can be a point of such sensitivity, because I think there's a tendency to blame the victim. So that's really the problem we have here, is that oh, that's your fault. And of course, what we've learned is research suggests very clearly that obesity is not simply behavior. It does involve substantial physiologic contributions. The short answer to your question, though, is to try to recognize what are the goals for that person, because it isn't the case that they necessarily don't know that they have a problem. The question is, what is the goal and where is a first step to addressing it? I think that's really the case. Is that something, for example, you say, well, is one of your goals to be healthier? And this person says, well, yeah, I want to be healthier. Was one of your, what's the step you would take? And if the person says, well, I ought to get some of this weight off. Oh, okay. Well, what's the step you could take after that? If you have this higher order goal of health, a secondary goal of weight change, then third is, what step do we take toward that? That might say, well, maybe the answer is, well, talk with your family doctor about it. Maybe it's, talk to your cardiologist about it. Because of course we have options now, right? We have new medications, we have behavioral change programs, we have Noom, right? An app. We have lots of options. But what won't work is feeling like somebody's being blamed as the victim. And I think that happens. All of us do that by accident. We don't mean to, but there's a shame and a guilt around our health at times. Oh, I wasn't a good boy. I wasn't a goody two shoes. I ate this, or I drank that, or I didn't exercise, or whatever it is. And I think we have to get away from that sort of, you're the problem, and simply say, what's the North Star? What are we trying to move toward? We're trying to move toward better health, physically, mentally, spiritually, financially. What's that North Star? And try to stay focused on that, as opposed to that. And I wasn't suggesting we were going to blame them, but the topic is so sensitive, most people could interpret it that way.
Very good. Well, for those of you that have joined us today, and those of you that are watching in the future, I just recommend you take 1, 2, no more than 3 things. Sam covered a lot of information today, but just pick 1, 2, or 3 things that maybe you can incorporate into your life. Whether you have a heart condition or not, just make your life better. You maybe have more strength to spend with those grandkids, more years to spend with that spouse, whatever it may be. So we wish you the best. We pray God's blessings on you. Sam, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
An honor to have you. And your presentation was spot on. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.